This is the Sports Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Campbell Dobbin. This is episode 3, and I told everyone this past couple few days. We are going to have a big guest on. He is from the Garden State, good friend of mine. He is a PLO All-Star. He also played formerly of the Major Lacrosse League with the Florida Launch. Currently plays also with the San Diego Seals of the National Lacrosse League, which is indoor, aka box. He is Jules Heningburg. Jules, I've told everyone about this. Everyone's hyped about this episode. I'm so glad to have you on. Um, First of all, let's talk about your upbringing in this game and what your background is. Most people know you're from Jersey. Everyone knows your story, how great of an athlete you are, and how your family has been so supportive of you throughout your whole life. And just give us a quick brief discussion about your background and why you love this game so much.
Absolutely. First and foremost, Campbell, thank you for having me on. I've known Campbell for a long time now, dating back to when I was playing back in high school. And I'm excited for him to kind of get this going and have me on as a guest. So I just want to thank you for having me on. And yeah, absolutely. I'll talk about, my upbringing in the game. I know you're pretty familiar with it, but I was born in Maplewood, New Jersey, about 20 minutes from where Campbell currently lives. And I played for the Maplewood Lacrosse Club. Campbell's father actually was my coach for a year in a time span. He was one of the directors of the Maplewood Lacrosse Club, but he also was the lead director of the New Jersey All-Star program for U13 that I played on. And I was lucky enough to get to know Skip during that time. And he was a huge advocate to get me on that team, which was definitely a big confidence booster for me to be recognized as one of the more elite players in New Jersey at the time, when I actually felt like a lot of the time I wasn't included in those kind of things. And that kind of was a big part of my story where, I was growing up playing the sport. I started playing in second grade in Maplewood, and it was hard for me to kind of, feel like I was a part of the game just because the socioeconomic disparities that exist within our sport and sort of just trying to get acclimated to being a part of it. And that was difficult for me to kind of cope with and deal with, but definitely Skip did a huge favor on my behalf. I don't know if I played well enough for that tryout. I don't know if, I deserved, quote unquote, to be picked for that team by other people, but I know he was a huge advocate for me to really get me on there. And that was definitely a turning point in my career. I went on to play at Columbia High School for 2 years in Maplewood, New Jersey, before I transferred to Seton Hall Prep School. And Aiden, Campbell's younger brother right now, is currently at Seton Hall Prep playing lacrosse as well, which is pretty exciting for me to follow along with. And I went on to play at Rutgers University, where I played there for 4 years. I was two-time captain there. I graduated as the number 2 all-time career points, and I went on to play get drafted, in the Major League Lacrosse. I was the number 7 draft pick for that, and went on to play a season there prior to playing in the PLL, where I just started my career there last season. And I was traded 3 games into the current team I'm on, of the PLL Redwoods, which was also another huge turning point for me in my career. And as well as I played box lacrosse for the past 2 seasons for the San Diego Seals. Still looking to break through in box lacrosse, and I don't know if that opportunity is going to come now or later, but it's been a great experience to really get to know the Canadian culture in that game, and what it's been able to do for me for my career has been awesome. So, Campbell, I'm excited to be on here.
Thank you. And I know you talked about your 4 years at Rutgers. You split time in high school with Columbia, where, of course, my father, James Donovan, went along with past members of his family. And you also went to Seton Hall Preparatory School by way of West Orange, New Jersey, where my brother currently is a rising sophomore. And let's talk about your recruiting process a little bit, because where you came from and how much of a struggle it was to get your name out there, possibly playing club or playing local teams. I know you played for Lean Edge when you were younger, trying to get your name up in the recruiting process. So speak upon how difficult it was to try to boost your name and sort of say the rankings of your current status.
Definitely. So I think for me, my dad was a big advocate for me to play rec lacrosse my whole life. And he always put me in leagues that perhaps the namesake wasn't always there, but it was always an opportunity for me to compete, especially with older players and against older players. And I think that was a huge advantage that I had over other athletes in general. With that being said, I always knew that in order to continue to grow in my career and continue to do what I wanted in the sport, which was play at the highest level, I had to somehow, weasel my way into, the recruiting circles. And it wasn't easy. I definitely haven't had the hardest path in that sense. And I definitely haven't had the easiest, but I had my own path. And I recognized very early on that, I didn't have those helmets that those other kids had, the trilogy, the tri-state, the leading edge. I would go out there in my regular old Maplewood lacrosse CLH2, and I would play against these guys. And it got to the point where in around ninth grade, I started to realize that there was some acknowledgement about players that I perhaps wasn't getting because I wasn't playing on those teams. And I knew that in order to get that acknowledgement, and I needed that acknowledgement to get recruited, I had to start to think about what team was there in the state of New Jersey that was going to put me in the best position to just have whatever skills I had in that moment in time be, portrayed and really blown up right on the recruiting circuit. And I knew that in order to do that, I had to get on the leading edge team. So that fall of my sophomore year, I tried out for leading edge. And that allowed me, the coaches there were shocked that they had never seen me before and knew about me as a player. And that allowed me to then really kind of take that next step. I also played and tried out for Under Armour before I had ever played for leading edge. And my coaches, I had made the leading edge team at that point, but I hadn't played for them yet. So my coaches knew who I was. I went to the Under Armour tryouts, and I was able to make a name for myself there as well as a sophomore. Another whole political thing was because no one knew who I was and because I didn't have enough of a name, I was not able to be selected for the Under Armour team. But all the college coaches went back to my leading edge coach, because that's who I put down, and said, who is this kid? And we like him a lot. We're going to follow him. And that was kind of where my name really started to get put out there. And then it just kind of took off from there. And once I had the platform and the opportunity to showcase who I was, it was pretty easy for me to get the recognition that, I needed in terms of what the spots were available and where I stood across the recruiting landscape.
That's really good. Also to bring upon, do you have like a favorite memory of playing the sport, or probably with you and your teammates or your family, any best moments? Because I recall, you intercepting, I believe, a pass from Penn State goalie and you scored. And that insane move you put on that Michigan goalie. I was there personally. I was standing next to your father. That made SportsCenter top 10. But are those like some like your favorite memories, bringing Rutgers on the map, personally wise?
I'll give you two. So I'll say from high school, my favorite memory was beating Dumbarton when they were ranked number 1 in the country at Seton Hall. I had to sit out that whole first half of the season due to transfer rules. And I was able to start playing. We went on a 10-game winning streak and got to the semifinals. And at that point, Dumbarton was ranked number 1 in the country. They were the big, bad blue-green wave, and no one knew who I was. I hadn't played Dumbarton yet, and I came in and did what I had to do, well, with my teammates as well, who uplifted me in a lot of ways in that game. And we were able to take advantage of it and win. And that was a huge moment in my high school career. And then in college, just like you're saying, one of those games was Penn State, where it was senior night, and we were able to capture a win after being down 6-0 in the first quarter, and able to beat Penn State for a cup that was on the line. And that was really one of the defining moments of my career and Rutgers lacrosse in general. And it's funny you bring up that Michigan play. I actually thought that was just a regular run of the old mill play for me. And it got on SportsCenter, but my teammate did a backhand goal as time expired for my friend Christian, which I thought was a way cooler play than that. And that did not get blown up. So it's just funny that people, kind of reference that play and don't ever talk about his backhand, which is a whole other, me getting in the spotlight and doing what I did to get to where I was. And then people kind of, amplifying that. Yet he was a player that wasn't in the spotlight as much, doing just as cool things. And that's kind of just speaks to, the where we are in the sports world of lacrosse and how we can look to continue to amplify the right people and continue to grow the game in terms of who's amplifying those individuals.
So to get more on the lacrosse side, I know you have many nicknames. Juke is one of them because of your play behind X. And I remember watching that interview with the one and only Paul Carcaterra, and you said you modeled your game after two famous basketball players in the NBA, Kyrie Irving, who was from New Jersey, and also Lonzo Ball. And you said that because you broke your hand during when you were younger and you had to play basketball left-handed. And you modeled your game after certain crossover moves behind X. So how did that help you play both ways with their dominant hand and less dominant hand to make you more of a better player?
So I'll say that I'm very grateful for that experience that I had when I was younger, when I broke my hand, because it gave me a lot of perspective in terms of how to take care of my body, how to work hard, because once it was broken, that took away a lot of natural ability I had. And that put me in the mindset that now, I was kind of not even two steps, a lot of steps back in terms of, what I perhaps built up, in terms of wall ball, mechanics, shooting, everything was just all kind of taken away because I had broken my wrist. And so that put me in a position where I now had to relearn all those things. And, a lot of stuff had happened in the rest of my body to overcompensate for that I had to unlearn. And it was just a lot of that was, it was great for me, right? And as much as things were hard, it was really helpful for me to, move forward in my life and gain perspective and grow. And one of the byproducts of that was now being forced to use my left hand so much. When I finally got my right hand to be as good as it once was, now I'd been using my left hand the whole time. And one of the things I actually talked to my roommate about is how, Canadian players oftentimes are only one-handed and how much that limits them. But I think there's really a fine balance of having two hands, but understanding like how you are perceived as a threat to the defenseman, in terms of, where you are on the field and where they're trying to funnel you, and how much you can really, control the defenses by making them think you're only going to go to one hand. So it's definitely a balancing act. I think you can learn from people who are ambidextrous, but you can also really learn from people who, only use one hand, because there's so many successful players in both basketball and lacrosse and other sports that are so one-handed dominant that they're able to really utilize that lack of going to one hand to their advantage, to always set up to get back to their strong hand. So it's definitely a blessing for me in a lot of ways, but I definitely know that there's more out there than just being, a player that can go with both hands.
Yeah, so I know your jersey number is very special to you, and there's a great story behind it. But I always had this theory that always New Jersey players from past, present, and future love to wear the number 7. And my lacrosse coach at Montclair State University, Matt Posque, from Clark, New Jersey, wore number 7 throughout his career. And how does that number, like, how is it just so important to you? Did you just pick it, or was it like meant for you, or chosen wise, I guess?
So I would say when I was in elementary school, about third grade, I started to actively hear about Bobby Bianchi, who was a significant athlete and person in our town growing up. He played for Maple Lacrosse Club and went on to play at Columbia High School. He broke and held all the records in New Jersey, at Columbia, and a lot in New Jersey in terms of scoring and in terms of being, a great athlete on the lacrosse field. So playing in the Maple Lacrosse Club, we always wore a patch that said number 7. And there was always the idea that you could never wear number 7 because it was in honor of Bobby, who had passed away due to a helicopter training accident, because he joined the Navy. And part of being in the Navy is you have to serve, or he went to the Naval Academy. Part of being in the Naval Academy, you then have to serve after, and he tragically passed away. So I was always hearing stories of him and number 7 and hearing about how good of a person he was, above and beyond the lacrosse field. He was such a good person. And I just really always felt like early on, I was, in a way bitter that I couldn't wear number 7 because of this person, but that very bitterness very quickly turned to trying to prove that I deserved to wear number 7. And then it turned to, sort of just acknowledging who he was and how much of an effect he had on the people in our community. And from there, when I got to college, I just, was like, hey, like I could never wear number 7. I wore number 4 at Seton Hall. out of respect, right, I wasn't able to wear number 7 at Columbia because of that same rule. So I just took the numbers I knew, and moved on to Seton Hall. I think someone else had number 7 at Seton Hall as well. When I got to Rutgers, number 7 was available. So I said, I think this is a time where I can, take this number and do right by it. So that's kind of where the story of that kind of really comes about.
That's very good. So let's talk about your adversity battles. And let's talk about the story of how you got traded that week in June. It's been a year, and many people have said this might be the best thing that's ever happened to you, because the next game you had your career high. You had the career high in the league until I believe Matt Rambo scored more points in a game. But take us through like that moment where either you got the call or news broke out on social media, and what has the being on the Redwoods helped, and with Coach Saint Laurent, with that mentality that like I got your back, you got mine, and this a close knit group, because you guys were like in the battle of standings last year, and you ultimately go to the PL championship, ultimately losing in overtime in a heartbreaker to the Whipsnakes, the team that traded you. So how did that like whole like story turn out? Because it had to be like the story of the season for you.
I think, so I'll say Rambo did tie me in points for a game, and then so did Tom Schreiber, and then Will Manny has the league leading number. I think he had 11 points in the playoffs when Archers beat the Atlas. So I'll just set the record straight there. But for me, getting traded was I kind of figured it was coming, because we had too many good attackmen on our team that weren't being utilized well enough. So I knew one of us had to go, for good, bad, or indifferent, right? There's a lot of reasons why you get traded. I think the way it was portrayed to me on that Monday, I woke up in the morning, went through my regular business, and I saw Coach Staggs was calling me. I knew that I had just thrown a game-winning assist to Ryan Jenner and had another point that game, which was, for the PLL, 2 points in a game was, significant in terms of if you're playing a good game. Like that's, a lot of people didn't even have, up until like game 3, had 0 points. Really good players across the league had 0 points. So I knew that I wasn't getting sat. So I knew I was getting traded. I didn't know it was going to be the Redwoods, but looking back, Kyle and Joe came up to me at training camp and said, we're probably going to try to trade for you, after I had 6 points in 2 quarters versus the Redwoods when I was playing for the Whipsnakes. And I was in training camp. Coach Staggs told me that he traded me for a first-round draft pick. So he was, felt like that was a good trade, and then the value was there, and that I should be happy about the value. And he also said he felt like it was best for my career, because I would be able to get more spotlight there and be able to have the ball more. I do agree with that sentiment, but I found out that that was a lie in terms of who I got traded for after. I got traded for a 4th-round draft pick and an LSM that now no longer is even on the Whipsnakes. So I felt slighted in that way. I don't harbor any, grudge about it, but I knew that was not truthful. So that was, disappointing to hear. But what was exciting to hear was Coach Nat, how excited he was for me to come to the team and what he expected out of me as a player. And probably for the first time since my transferring to Seton Hall, did I have a coach that I felt recognized my value as a person and the player entirely, and was putting me in a position to demonstrate that value to the team. And every time that happens with a coach, I never let them down, because I know what my value is, and I know how important it is to really shake a man's hand and say you're going to do a job. So I was excited to do that for Coach Nat and do that with him for the team. And obviously that was on display in the first game that I played when I came back, and really for the rest of the season. So it was great to have a coach. I think that's what every player wishes he has in his coach, is someone that believes in them for the role that they have in their team and empowers them to do that role to the best of their ability, and then challenges them when they're not doing that role. And that's exactly what I get out of Coach Nat. And I'm very grateful for that relationship. And I look to continue to grow that and continue to grow as a player and a leader and a teammate with him as my leader.
Speaking of PO training camp, the infamous viral video of you going at it with some of your future teammates at that time, and I mean that got a whirlwind of views. But uh, so let's move on with the branding that you have installed or being sponsored. You're an athlete with Epic Lacrosse. You work with Mission Primed and First Class Lacrosse as an ambassador, and you and your brother Dylan Heningburg also run the 747 Lacrosse that is based in your hometown of Maplewood. It's a clinic, camps. It gets kids better in northern New Jersey, wherever they do a lot with kids from that area. So how important is it to be sponsored wise or like becoming a brand and also developing a program to help younger kids get better?
So I would say it's definitely important to have a sponsor in terms of having, it's similar to how you have a coach, support you. That's what a good sponsor does. They obviously, have some sort of monetary attachment to you, which helps you pursue the goals that you have in mind. But they also have, resources that they can utilize to help you and push you in the goals that you have as an athlete. And so specifically for me, and particularly for me, Epic has voiced that they are fully on board with everything that I'm doing as a person on and off the field. And that support is great because Epic, I believe, is one of the companies at the forefront of really pushing the game and using technology and being innovative in that sense. So to have that kind of company back me and support me gives me a lot of tools and a lot of confidence to be able to go out and do the things that I want to do and that I believe can help, with obviously the help of many other people. But personally, that connection with Epic, First Class Lacrosse is no different. Deemer started First Class Lacrosse to become the best training resource and tool across the country, which I believe we're going in that direction. And he's been able to establish that. And now I'm able to come on and be an advocate for it. And again, all these things are, at the end of the day, and so as with Mission Prime, are built to help the next generation. And I think that's what it's all about. And as an athlete, the way I play on the field helps all of those things. And at the end of the day, me playing on the field is just in a self-expression of the game I love, and allows me to push the game forward for the other kids that are looking up to me and the individuals that don't know they need the help and that I can help in a lot of ways. So I'm excited for those partnerships and to see where they continue to flourish.
Yeah, and then also I forgot to mention Juke Lab. That is your creation, and based off your nickname that has been said by many fellow PLL players, social media advocates, and fans. How has that grown into what it is now since you have created it within the past year or so?
I created the Juke Lab with the intention to really start to change the way that, both players and coaches think about dodging, not just, the hard juke that I have and that's really one of my go-to moves, but really just in general, the idea that dodging is, I felt like in lacrosse, because lacrosse is such an underdeveloped sport in a lot of ways, specifically with teaching the game, I felt like there was more to dodging than I was taught growing up and that I was taught in college, that I felt like I understood better than other people because of my diligence in trying to improve my dodging and learning from other people and just seeking out information about it. There's so many different styles and so many different nuances of dodging that so many different people have. I felt like I could put that all together and start to speak to that more. And that's why I created the Juke Lab. And now under First Class Lacrosse, I'm able to have a platform to amplify that and work with Deemer to learn from him about what his thoughts about dodging are, because he's such a great coach and has such a great mind about it. We can put our thoughts together and continue to grow the Juke Lab underneath First Class Lacrosse.
Yeah, so now I'm going to get in. This country has been dealt with very, very hard circumstances the past weeks and the past month of the death of George Floyd, the death of Ahmaud Arbery, and the unfortunate death of Breonna Taylor. And we have multiple sports organizations speaking out against violence against African Americans in our country, and most notably, the rise of African American lacrosse players has been tremendous. And of course, you have Kyle Harris on their team, now Miles Jones, and of course yourself as an advocate, as well as support from your coach, Coach Nat. How is it so important for young African American lacrosse players to build their platform and to to be told that you're good enough to play in a sport that's mostly predominantly white, and that you're deserving of a spot no matter where you come from, and religion, race, gender, whatever? And how is that like important to you now to use your voice and speak out against tough times that have been dealt throughout the country for many, many years and decades?
I believe that something that gets overlooked is how it affects younger players to not see people like themselves or have advocates like themselves at the highest level. Because I had my own relationship with race growing up. I was able to overcome it because of where I grew up, because of who my father was, because of my personality. There are many of people and players in other sports as well that do not have that luxury or that privilege because of the emotional issues they face in trying to feel like a part of something when they, for whatever reason and whatever experiences, did not feel a part of it. And that's not just a race thing. That is across the board with a lot of minorities, with women, with people with special needs, there's so many things. If you as a young person don't have that advocate and don't have someone to believe in and see that they're out there for you, then you might give up. And that is why for lacrosse players, I feel like it's so important for me and other guys to be able to be that for those young players who otherwise could potentially give up on the sport for the sole reason that they didn't feel like they were included in it. And that's something that I take very personally because I had that experience and that I was able to overcome it. Now I have a duty and a responsibility to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to make sure that feeling I had isn't something even greater for other individuals. And if I can help that, then I know that I'm doing my job. And I know that other people feel the same way, and a lot of people feel the same way in a bunch of other respective sports and fields of work. And I believe my genuine path in the game has always been to uplift cultures and leave the place better than I found it. I did that at Seton Hall. I did that at Rutgers. I believe I'm doing that for the PLL, and I believe I can do that for, something greater than all of that. So every single day I have on top of mind a number of things: my work, becoming the best version of myself on the field, being a good person, a lot of things. But one of those things is, how can I leave the game better than I found it? And that is what I'm currently doing.
That's great. And I know we've talked off air about these unwanted issues and how people in all across sports, anything in society can come together to fix this drastic problems that we're having in this country. And to see like everybody come together, because we're come together with the coronavirus and stuff, and this happens, and of course it's very, very sad. And I think the message is that we have to come together more often, and we have to realize that we have to hear and see what we know that's wrong, and we need to make sure that it has to be right. We have to make it right. And I think sports, in a way, it makes it all come together, because watching it and seeing your favorite athletes and what they believe in and how the culture of it is just magnificent, and that they use their voice for the right reasons and just to give their thoughts of how like we can be better at in the society, because social media, again, it can bring out the worst of us at times. And it, I mean, people like to hide behind the phone, and but also there are always good advocates for social justice. And it's good for many people to real to have their voice and speak upon what's right, what's wrong in today's world.
I think one of the simplest things we can all do for humanity's purposes is to just care a little bit more about the individual to the left and to the right of you, no matter who they are, no matter the color of their skin, no matter where they grew up, no matter what their religion is, no matter what you think they feel, whatever the case is. I think a lot of problems would be solved if in the United States, at least, and I'm not educated enough about other countries' dilemmas, but we're all still human, so it could potentially apply to them. And I know it does apply to them. When I say them, I mean there's tons of other countries that are dealing with a lot worse problems than the United States. But I think at its core, if you in the United States, we have 365 plus million people. If 365 million people snap their fingers right now and care genuinely 50% more about the guy to the left and to the right of them, the woman, whoever the individual is, then this country would be a lot better of a place. And that goes for COVID, that goes for race relations, that goes for any issue that we face, that goes for trans and LGBTQ community, that goes for individuals with special needs, that goes for women, that goes for everything. Just care more about the person, and we will see more issues disappear before our eyes.
Exactly. We're gonna end it off on here. Jules, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate it. I wish you luck in a couple weeks when you and your squad are off to Utah. I'm not gonna place a bet because I will wait a couple years for that, but I got my stock on the Redwoods to win the POL championship this year to get revenge. So I thank you again. I wish you and your family all the best. Please tell everyone to say hello. And thank you again for coming on.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you for having me on.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Sports Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Campbell Donovan. That was Jules Heningburg. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Please follow on Instagram, Twitter. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, whatever it may be. Sports is the beacon of light and the beacon of hope. Do something today. It's a bright, sunny day out in New Jersey, and it's probably bright out looking at the palm trees in San Diego, California, with a 3-hour time difference. But as well, this is Campbell Donovan from the Sports Talk Podcast. I thank you again. Thank you all.